the sweet smell of cotton candy, the piping of a calliope, the silly clowns. Nothing evokes nostalgia like an old-fashioned circus or carnival.
Hello everyone, I am back today to start discussing some of the topics that went into my third novel, Shores of Chaos, Darkness Follows. This is the sequel to Shipwrecked. In this one we see the Ashman family continuing to deal with the dark entity that they faced on the shores of Wawanok Point, but this time it's invaded their own home. One of the things I included in this novel was a carnival, so I'm going to be discussing the history of carnivals today. So a lot of American-style carnivals can actually trace their roots to the World's Columbian Exposition, which was held in 1893 in Chicago. So while the exposition had a lot of buildings and different exhibits for guests to see, it also did include an amusement area on the Midway Plaisance. And this is where the term midway came from, and that is the term used to describe the location within carnivals that contain games, sideshows, and rides. On the Midway Plaisance, there was a Ferris wheel, as well as a captive balloon ride, so this was a precursor to amusement parks. It also featured acrobats and exhibits of people from other cultures. Otto Schmidt, who worked at the World's Fair, ended up opening his own amusement company. And by 1937, there were over 300 traveling carnivals in the US. So I did a lot of research when trying to see what kind of games would be at early carnivals, as the novel takes place in 1902. And from what I saw, a lot of the games they had then, we actually still play today. So for example, they had a baseball toss, a ring toss, and even rifle shooting. It wasn't always clear what the prizes were for winning these games, but they seemed to range from vases to knives to even nightstand clocks. And like today, many of these games are rigged so that the person playing it would keep on giving their cash out. Eventually, these sideshows and games lost popularity and the big attraction became rides. The turn of century is when a lot of popular carnival foods come about. So cotton candy, which at the time was known as fairy floss, debuted at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. The 1890s saw the first mobile popcorn maker, and the candy apple was invented in 1908. The first real modern circus was invented in England in the 1770s by Philip Astley, who brought acts together inside of a ring. Then his student John Bill Ricketts brought the circus to Philadelphia in 1793. And of course, P.T. Barnum started his circus operation in 1871, and by the next year he had it traveling by train. And then he joined forces with James A. Bailey in 1880. Their circus showcased new inventions, exotic animals like elephants and tigers, freaks, clowns, and acrobats. You also have the Ringling Brothers, who started their circus, and by 1907 they were the biggest traveling circus by railroad. They also purchased Bailey Circus, becoming Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, and their circus lasted for 146 years.
So the Ringling Brothers Circus initially closed down in 2017 after dropping ticket sales and pressure from animal rights groups. However, the circus made a comeback in 2023 without the animals or the clowns in full face makeup. I'm guessing because people are just terrified of them.
Circuses and carnivals also had sideshows, which were often on a tent next to the big top. And these sideshows included a number of acts such as snake charmers, high wire acts, and burlesque acts. These shows also included freak shows, which included people and animals who were considered abnormal or of exotic nature. P.T. Barnum helped pave the way for these freak shows in the U.S. when he opened his American Museum in 1841. He featured performers who either had a disability or were considered exotic by audiences. And then these performers eventually moved to the stage and sideshows. And these freak shows would often include performers who had some kind of physical condition, whether it was maybe a missing limb, an extra limb, obesity, something of that nature, and then they would put them on display. A lot of the shows would also have at least like one exhibit of a type of exotic animal or something like that. And while we would look down on that today, exploiting people that had these kind of conditions for monetary gain. You also have to remember that in this time period, these people may not have had a lot of other options for employment, so they were welcomed at the sideshows where they were able to make a living.
There were many freak show participants who became famous, such as Joseph Merrick, who was called the Elephant Man because of the large growths on his body. He sadly died at only 27 from a dislocated neck. There was also Charles Stratton, known as General Tom Thumb, who was exhibited by P.T. Barnum because he stood at only 40 inches tall as a result of his dwarfism. And another performer was Stephen Bibrowski, who had hypertrichosis, which causes excessive hair growth. He was known as Lionel the Lion-Faced Boy, and worked for Barnum and Bailey Circus and the Coney Island Dreamland Circus.
So the popularity of freak shows declined in the 1940s, partly because television and movies took off, but also because the medical community was describing these conditions more thoroughly and really explaining what was causing them. So that's just a brief overview of carnivals and circuses and freak shows. The link to the blog post for this will be in the description below, where I include my sources and a bit more information. Feel free to take a look at Shores of Chaos Darkness Follows. It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and a few other places. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.